Hello everyone, this is Alexey Borealis. In this video I want to show you how to make a relatively accurate prediction of the year's main event using a blind chart without specifying the event exact date. Yesterday, one of my students asked me to help analyze the primary directions in her horoscope. Since I knew nothing about her life and her life context, it was a blind chart for me. The student's question was about the directions in September 2017. You can see that during this time, Venus and Jupiter meet each other twice. However, these two directions actually symbolize the same event. The reverse direction of Jupiter to Venus and the direct direction of Venus to Jupiter indicate the same event. Therefore, by default, I will choose the direction that most strongly promises the event for my consideration. The promise of the event is contained in the parameter of the event, the part of the horoscope that, together with the celestial sphere, moves towards the fixed significator. So I see that out of two parameters, Venus is the most prominent one, as it is naturally benefic, and it is in own sign. So whatever this Venus represents in the chart, the removal of evil or granting the good, it will manifest clearly this year. So now I look at the significator. The significator represents the area of life in which the parameter's promise will be realized. If Jupiter, for example, indicates illness, and Venus in the natal chart also relates to illness, then this direction will bring relief from the prolonged illness. And if Jupiter, for example, signifies a spouse, and Venus signifies a spouse by being connected with the seventh house, then this direction will bring marriage. So let's see which astrological houses determine Jupiter's manifestation in particular areas of life. Jupiter is in the 8th house, which means it could indicate death. It rules the 4th house, which could signify a wealthy male person from the family or real estate of the native. And Jupiter also naturally represents money. However, for it to express its natural rulership in this chart, it needs a strong connection with the 2nd house. Such a connection does exist. Indeed, being in the 8th house, Jupiter accidentally ruled the opposite house of money. And this means that Jupiter can be a natural significator of wealth. So Jupiter is the significator of money, real estate, and death. So now let's see what the parameter is the most closely related to: money, death, or matters of the 4th house. We see that Venus is not connected to the 8th or 4th houses. It doesn't rule them, it's not located in them, doesn't cast aspects to their cusps, and isn't the dispositor of their rulers. But look, Venus rules the 2nd house of money. This aligns perfectly with Jupiter's role as the natural significator of money in this chart. So the direction of the ruler of the 2nd house, which promises an influx of money to the natural ruler of money, is quite capable of fulfilling this promise at the end of 2017. My student wanted to understand whether this direction can bring about the purchase of a house, as Jupiter rules the 4th house of chart. And my answer is no. For a house purchase to materialize, a parameter of a new real estate must approach Jupiter as the significator of real estate. However, Venus, which brings good fortune, is not connected to real estate at all. Jupiter simultaneously represents a wealthy relative due to the intersection of its natural significance and accidental rulership of the 4th house of the family. So it is logically aligns with the promise of significant money. However, it is no by means certain that the money will come specifically from a wealthy relative. We cannot determine the source until we look into the refining solar return. So I also noticed that right before this financial direction, there was another one, a favorable sextile from Saturn in its place of exaltation, which approached the significator of wealth, the Pars of Fortune. However, Saturn, or its promising sextile, must be closely connected with the second house for this direction to materialize, because the prometer should promise events related to the significator. And once again, I turn to the radix. Indeed, Saturn rules the second house by exaltation, and the location of the aspect, 18 degrees of Libra, falls right in the middle of the second house of money. So yes, this direction also promises wealth and co-occurs with the following one. Two bright directions promising wealth, this is a strong indicator of the year's main event. However, we must ensure that the solar return chart confirms the promises of both directions. I will move on to the solar return and start with examining the first and the second houses. These houses will show how successful the native's life and activities will be that particular year. After all, if I see that the year will be full of failures and losses, it will significantly diminish the potential of the wealth promised by the directions. The ruler of the first house is the malefic Mars in the unfavorable 8th house, and this strongly connects the native to death, and the radical Mars also rules the 8th house. If the previous direction had promised death, then with such a solar return I would be very concerned about the native's fate. Fortunately, the solar return only confirms or refutes the indications of the previous directions. It doesn't produce significant events by itself, as some modern astrologers believe. So, of course, there will be no death, but the fact that the malefic planet has ended up in unfavorable house and became the rule of life for the coming year immediately reduces the promises of the overall financial fortunate year. Mars manifests through its dispositor, Mercury, which is in that chart rules the 8th house and is simultaneously located in the 6th. The 10th house shows the native's activities overall, while the 6th indicates work for minimal pay or in poor conditions. Since Mercury, which rules the 10th house in the radix, also rules the 10th house in the solar return, it repeats its primary role, so this year will be full of activity. But since Mercury is in the 6th house of great need, we clarify that this is about active engagement in the struggle for basic necessities. The nature of Mars, the ruler of the first house, also speaks to the year's character. Pay attention to what I'm doing here. First, I study the planets' repeating roles, that is, the role that they take on both from radix and in solar return. For example, it's important to me that Mercury rules active work in both the radix and the solar return chart this year. Second, I look for the intersection of different meanings of the same planet, like finding the overlapping area between Mercury's role as active work and its role in harsh existence. Third, I seek intersections between a few planets that are logically connected. For example, Mercury represents activity this year, and Mars represents life this year, and these two meanings are logically connected. And if the activity is associated with need and life with struggle due to Mars' nature, then it is clear that the intersection pinpoints to a struggle to meet basic needs. Fourth, I positively refuse to attribute meanings to the planet that they cannot carry this year without the reason. For instance, even though the ruler of the life is in the 8th house, I refuse to attribute it with the meaning of mortal danger or injury simply because the preceding directions leave Mars no chance to fulfill such a role this year. So far, from what I see, I haven't found confirmation of good fortune this year. Moreover, if I look at Venus, the ruler of money in the radix, she has fallen into the place of her detriment this year. So the year indeed promises to be on a hardship. However, we have two directions at our disposal, both promising wealth, where besides Venus, there is another parameter of wealth, Saturn. So I looked at the Saturn and immediately noticed that Saturn and the natural significator of wealth, the parts of fortune, were located in the second house of money for this year. So this placement fully confirms the first direction. Furthermore, Jupiter, the natural significator of money from the second direction, has begun to rule this year's finances and two financial significators within the second house. In other words, Jupiter has also repeated its natural role as significator of money, specifically for this year. At the same time, note that Mercury, the significator of laboring needs this year, has moved into the 13th degree of Taurus, which is the exact degree where the Venus, the fortunate parameter of financial gain in the direction, is located in the radix. Undoubtedly, significant money will come to the native's life in acute need. Take note of this as well. Jupiter, the significator of money in both radix and solar this year, has also taken on the rulership of the fourth house this year. Mars, the ruler of the first house this year, is in the 8th house, which means it accidentally takes on the significance of opposite house of money. And the same Mars rules the 5th house. Similarly, Jupiter fell into the 11th house this year, which means it accidentally took on the significance of the opposite 5th house. Venus, the ruler of money in the radix, also has ended up with the 5th house this year. So why do I focus so much on the 4th and 5th houses? This is because these houses are highlighted by the planets involved in the directions. Look, Saturn, involved into the directions for money, is located in the 4th house in radix and rules the 5th house. Jupiter, involved in the same directions for money, rules the 4th house in radix. So the connection between money and the 4th and 5th houses, which I noticed at the very beginning, is strongly repeated in the solar return. This means that, indeed, money will come from the matters related to the 4th and 5th houses. And what's particularly noteworthy is that in both the radix and the solar return, Jupiter rules the 4th house, which could indicate either a wealthy relative, the male from whom the money will come, or a large house whose sale or rental will also bring money. The 5th house could indicate money from a family member, from the sale of a property, and this both aligns with the previous point, or from a child. This means that a child could somehow become a source of money for the native. So I'm completely unaware of my student's life context. I don't know if she has children at all, if she has a large house or wealthy relative. So I outlined 3 possible scenarios. My prediction is as follows. This year will be marked by acute financial need, but at the end of the year, a large sum of money will arrive. It will come either from wealthy family member, such as father, uncle, or other male, or from the sale of a house, or from a child, or a combination of these sources. Why can I confidently speak about the end of this year without casting subsequent lunars? It is straightforward. If the money were to come at the beginning of the solar return, the year wouldn't be marked by the financial needs. Therefore, the funds can only arrive at the end of this year, and this is a consequence of basic logic. So when I described my prediction, my student was very excited. The thing is, I accurately described the events of that year without knowing anything about her life. Indeed, the entire year was very challenging financially, and at the end of the year, her wealthy relative, the father-in-law, gave her a significant sum of money. At the same time, she received a substantial payment from the government for her child, so the child also became a source of wealth. If my student watches this video, she might want to add something in the comments. And my goal is to show you the following. If I were to randomly ask 1,000 people on street to guess the main event of the year in the stranger's life, leaving the possibility that this might not be a significant event at all, very few would predict sudden and significant wealth. Even fewer might guess that it would happen at the end of the year. And a small fraction of them would still suggest that the source of the money would be a child or wealthy relative. So the probability of randomly guessing such an event is close to zero. However, with the techniques of Jean-Baptiste Marin and the methods of 17th century university-level astrology, we can achieve impossible, a fairly detailed predictions of life events. In addition, I will mention something in this video that I didn't share with my students. I saw that the first direction fulfills its promise more than the second, according to the solar return indications. Knowing that the final direction realizes the potential of the previous one, I expect the first direction to lay the groundwork and the subsequent one, more confirmed in the solar return, to actualize this potential. For such a pattern to be observed in the chart, the birth time needs to be shifted 1 minute earlier. This adjustment aligns the order of the directions very well with the solar return indicators. So I'm refining the birth time in the process, shifting it at least 1 minute earlier. And that's the end of this delineation. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider joining membership to access members-only video. See you in the next episode.